When we think of the Roman Empire, we often picture marble temples, great arenas, or mighty legions marching in formation. Yet one of Rome's most enduring legacies lies not in monuments of grandeur, but in something far quieter: the roads that stretched across its vast lands. For centuries, they connected cities to villages, ports to fortresses, and distant provinces back to the heart of Rome. To walk upon them was to walk upon history itself, each stone set with care, each mile bound to the rhythm of empire. The building of these roads was not a simple matter of laying stones. It was an act of vision and labor, of design and endurance. Beneath the surface lay layers of gravel, sand, and rock, carefully arranged to withstand centuries of weather and weight. Soldiers and laborers bent their backs to the work, carving paths through forests, across plains, over mountains, leaving behind routes so strong that many still exist today. Life moved upon these roads. Soldiers marched along them, their armor glinting in the sun. Merchants drove carts heavy with grain, wine, or cloth. Messengers rode swiftly, carrying news that bound distant provinces to the capital. And ordinary people walked them too. Farmers, travelers, families, their footsteps joining the countless millions who gave these roads their true meaning. The Roman roads were more than stone. They were the lifelines of an empire, the quiet strength beneath its might. To explore how they were built is to step into the world of patient labor, of careful design, of enduring ambition. It is to hear the rhythm of picks and hammers, to feel the weight of stone, to imagine the long straight lines cutting across the landscape, carrying Rome's power further than its borders ever seemed to reach. And so, let us take a calm walk together, following the roads of Rome from their first marks on the earth to the paths that remain beneath our feet today. Long before the first stone was laid, before the sound of chisels struck the earth, the roads of Rome began as an idea, a vision of connection that reached far beyond the boundaries of any single city. The Roman Empire, as it expanded across mountains, plains, and coastlines, understood that strength was not only measured in armies or walls, but in the ability to move. To move quickly, to move efficiently, to move without hesitation. Roads were not just conveniences. They were lifelines, threads that tied together lands that would otherwise remain distant, scattered, and divided. The earliest Roman leaders understood this clearly. When the Republic was still young, when its borders did not yet stretch across seas, the need for connection already pressed upon them. Armies could not remain strong if they were delayed by marshes or lost in forests. Supplies could not feed soldiers if wagons could not pass swiftly. Messages could not carry authority if couriers were slowed by poor paths. Roads were the answer, a system that would overcome the limits of nature, shaping the land to suit the needs of a growing power. This vision was both practical and ambitious. To the Romans, a road was never only a track worn by carts and footsteps. It was a line of order imposed upon the wildness of nature. It cut straight where rivers meandered. It climbed steadily where hills rose. It refused to bend to obstacles unless absolutely necessary. The Roman road was designed not to follow the land, but to master it, to show through stone and gravel that Rome's reach was steady, determined, and unbroken. This idea, simple at its core, became one of the most powerful tools of empire. The decision to build roads was always strategic. A new province brought under Roman control was not secure until a road connected it back to the heart of the Republic. Garrisons needed supply lines, governors needed communication, traders needed routes for their goods. Without roads, Rome would have been a patchwork of isolated territories. With roads, it became a single organism, every part tied back to the center. To the Roman mind, each stone set into the ground was not only for travel, but for unity, binding distant lands into one whole. But the vision was not purely military or political. The Romans believed in endurance, in building for generations to come. Where others might carve rough tracks that wore away in a season, the Romans planned for centuries. Their roads were meant to last, to carry not only the armies of today, but the merchants of tomorrow, the travelers of future decades, the children yet unborn. This foresight, this determination to build beyond the present, gave their roads a permanence that still astonishes. Many survive even now, their stones worn smooth but still firm beneath the weight of time. Imagine the conversations that shaped this vision. Senators debating the cost, generals arguing for speed, engineers sketching the line of a road across maps of forests and rivers. Each voice added to the plan, and in the end, the decision was always the same. The road must be built. Once decided, it was no longer only an idea. It became a promise to the army that would march, to the trader who would sell, to the family who would travel, to the empire itself. For the people of Rome, the roads came to symbolize more than utility. They were the mark of civilization, proof that order had replaced chaos, that structure had conquered wilderness. To stand on a newly built Roman road and look down its straight, unbroken path was to see not only distance but destiny. The road said, without words, that Rome was here and that Rome would remain. This vision, carried forward by rulers and realized by laborers, shaped the empire more deeply than any single battle or decree. It was the quiet strength beneath conquest, the invisible foundation beneath culture, the steady line upon which centuries of movement would rest. And so, before the first trench was dug, before the first stone was set, the Roman roads already existed, in the minds of those who saw not only the land as it was, but the empire as it could be. Before stone touched earth, before gravel was poured and sand was pressed down, every Roman road began with a decision. Where would it go? This choice was not left to chance. The Romans were not content with roads that wandered like rivers or bent easily to the shape of the land. They sought paths that were straight, efficient, and purposeful. To them, a road was not only a way to move from one place to another, it was a statement of order. A visible line of Roman wool drawn across the landscape. Surveyors, men skilled in the science of measurement, were the first to arrive. They carried simple tools but used them with precision. A groma, its cross arms strung with plumb lines to find true right angles. Rods and cords to measure distance. Sighting poles to mark direction. They worked with patience, their eyes fixed on distant hills, their lines stretched across fields, their markers placed with care. From one point to another, they plotted the course, seeking not the easiest way but the most direct. Hills would be cut, marshes filled, rivers bridged, all for the sake of a line that carried Rome's order through wild and uneven lands. The choice of path was strategic as well as practical. A road was not built for wandering. It was built to serve. Generals wanted routes that carried legions swiftly to borders. Governors demanded connections to new towns and provinces. Merchants hoped for ways to bring goods more easily to markets. Every decision of a surveyor carried with it the weight of the empire's needs. A mile chosen here, a bend accepted there, could shape the future of a region for centuries. Once a path was fixed, towns grew along it, trade flowed upon it, and people's lives followed its course. Yet the land was never silent in this process. Nature itself tested the vision of the surveyors. Rivers cut across intended lines. Mountains rose where straightness was planned. Swamps stretched wide across valleys. To abandon a direct line was against Roman instinct. Yet sometimes compromise was necessary. Bridges were imagined, causeways planned, embankments designed. Where others might have gone around, the Romans went through, carving stone into hillsides, filling marshes with layers of rock and timber, raising arches across rushing water. The chosen path was not dictated by the land. It was imposed upon it, an act of determination as much as design. Imagine the surveyors standing at the edge of a forest, their cords stretched taut, their sighting poles pointing into the shadows. Behind them waited soldiers, workers, and engineers, ready to cut and dig, to clear trees and level ground. Ahead lay wilderness, dark, tangled, filled with roots and stones. But the line was set, and the line would hold. In time, where silence and trees now stood, carts would roll, footsteps would echo, voices would mingle, and Rome's presence would be felt. The act of choosing the path was as much symbolic as it was practical. It was Rome's way of saying that no obstacle was too great, no distance too vast, no land too wild. To trace a line across hills and valleys was to claim them, to bind them to the empire. Each marker placed by a surveyor was a seed of change, a promise that stone and gravel would soon follow, that lives would soon be carried along the same ground. For the people who lived in those regions, the surveyor's choices often reshaped their world. A field once quiet would soon hear the rumble of carts. A valley once isolated would soon be crossed by travelers. A village once remote would soon find itself connected to markets, garrisons, and cities beyond imagination. The chosen path was not only a route, it was the beginning of transformation, a line that would alter trade, communication, and even the rhythm of daily life. Thus, every Roman road began not with stone, but with vision. The surveyors' patient work, their lines stretched across the earth, carried the empire's ambition long before the first laborer lifted a pick. To choose the path was to set the future, to draw in the air what would soon be carved in stone. And once the path was chosen, the road had already begun. Once the surveyors had marked the path, once the line of Rome's will had been traced across valleys and hills, the real labor began. To build a road was not simply to lay stones upon earth. It was to transform the land itself, to shape it into something stronger, straighter, and more enduring than nature alone would allow. Preparing the ground was the foundation of everything. Without it, no road could last, no stone could hold, no cart could pass safely. The first task was clearing. Along the chosen path, trees stood thick, their roots deep, their branches stretching wide. Forests had to be cut, stumps pulled from the ground with ropes and levers, brush burned away to make space for the line of the road. Men worked with axes and saws, the thud of wood striking wood echoing across valleys. The air filled with the scent of resin, with smoke from fires where branches were piled. Each tree felled was another step in turning wilderness into order, another step in Rome's quiet conquest of nature. Fields, too, were crossed, their soil turned and flattened, their stones removed one by one. The ground had to be made bare before it could be remade. Then came the leveling. The Romans refused to let their roads wander with the dips and rises of the land. Where the earth sloped, it was cut. Where it sank, it was filled. Teams of workers dug trenches through hillsides, carving steady gradients where steepness once stood. Others carried soil and stone to fill marshy ground, building causeways that lifted the road above water and mud. Every step was deliberate, every span of earth reshaped until it carried the straight, unwavering line of Rome's design. Nature bent to their tools, and the land itself began to reflect the empire's determination. Drainage was essential. The Romans understood that water, more than time or weight, was the enemy of roads. Left unchecked, rain pooled, softened soil, shifted foundations. And so ditches were dug on either side of the road, sloping away to guide water down and out. Channels were lined with stone, culverts built to carry streams beneath the road rather than over it. Every layer of preparation kept in mind the presence of water, ensuring that storms and seasons would not undo the labor of years, once cleared and leveled. The earth was pressed down firmly, beaten by tools and trampled by feet until it lay compact and steady. The sound of hammers striking soil, of rammers pounding, echoed along the path. Dust rose into the air, clinging to the skin of workers, settling over tools and baskets. The ground, once soft, became hard, ready to bear the layers that would follow. It was not glamorous work, but it was vital. For a weak foundation would mean a weak road, and a weak road would mean failure. Imagine the sight. Long lines of men working under the sun, their bodies bent to the task, their tools rising and falling in rhythm. Carts creaked as they carried away stones and earth. Voices called out, orders given, encouragement shouted. The road, still only a line in the dirt, began to take shape, stretching steadily into the distance. To stand at one end and look forward was to see the future emerging, a scar of order across the wilderness, soon to be filled with stone and life. Preparing the ground was also a kind of promise. It showed the land itself that Rome intended permanence. Other peoples might leave tracks of mud, paths worn thin by carts and animals, but the Romans demanded more. They dug deeply, shaped carefully, planned for centuries. The ground they left behind was not simply ready for travel. It was prepared for history, for the weight of legions, for the passage of time itself. And so, before the first layer of stone was laid, before the famous Roman roads stretched across the empire, there was this stage, the clearing, the cutting, the filling, the leveling, the draining, the quiet, patient work that few remembered but that made everything possible. It was slow, it was hard, it was relentless. But it was also the beginning of endurance, the hidden strength beneath every mile. Without it, the roads would crumble. With it, they became eternal. The ground was cleared, the earth pressed down, the drainage channels cut deep. Yet still the Roman road was not a road. It was only a foundation, waiting for the layers that would transform it into something enduring. The genius of the Roman road did not lie in its surface alone, the flat stones where feet and wheels would travel, but in the careful, unseen layers beneath. These layers, hidden, silent, invisible to the eye, were what gave Roman roads their strength, what allowed them to carry centuries of weight without crumbling. To understand how they were built is to glimpse the extraordinary patience of an empire that thought not in seasons, but in ages. The process began with the statumen, the first layer, the backbone of the road. Large stones were placed directly onto the prepared earth, fitted together like the rough bones of a skeleton. These stones were not polished, not cut for beauty, but chosen for size and strength. Workers carried them, rolled them, lowered them into place, arranging them side by side until the ground was covered. Each stone sat heavy, anchoring the road to the earth, ensuring that the weight above would not sink or shift. Imagine the sound of it, stones clashing, voices calling as men strained under their loads, the scrape of rock against rock as each was nudged into place. This was the first step in making the earth unyielding, turning soil into something as solid as bedrock. Above the statumen came the rudis, a layer of smaller stones mixed with lime or clay, beaten down into the gaps until they formed a firm bed. Carts arrived, carrying baskets of gravel, and men poured the mixture, spreading it evenly across the rough foundation. Then came the pounding, the endless rhythm of heavy mallets striking stone, driving the pieces into place, locking them together until they were as solid as the layer beneath. Dust filled the air, rising in clouds with every strike, settling over skin and clothing, making workers cough as they labored. Yet still they continued, for the rudis had to be firm, tight, and unyielding. It was not enough for the road to appear strong. It had to resist the pressure of wheels, the pounding of hooves, the march of thousands of feet. Next was the nucleus, the finer heart of the road. Here, crushed gravel, sand, and sometimes even broken tiles were poured and spread in a thin, smooth layer. Workers leveled it carefully, filling hollows, ensuring that the surface sloped gently downward on each side to allow rain to flow away. The nucleus was like the skin stretched over muscle and bone, smooth, even, designed to carry what lay above. The surface was firm, almost polished, as if preparing for the final layer that would give the road its face. And then came the summa crusta, the crown of the Roman road, the part seen and touched, the surface where wheels turned and footsteps echoed. Large, flat paving stones were laid carefully, one by one, their edges fitted so tightly that grass could not grow between them, their weight pressing downward to lock every layer below. These stones were chosen with care, cut by stonemasons so that each fit its neighbor, their flat faces polished by years of travel until they gleamed faintly in the sun. Workers lowered them into place with ropes and levers, shifting them gently, listening for the hollow sound that meant a gap beneath, filling it with gravel, pressing it firm. When at last the stone sat steady, the road took on its true form. To walk upon a finished Roman road was to feel solidity beneath your feet. It did not shift, it did not crumble, it did not give way. The layers beneath carried the weight, each serving its purpose, each guarding against the forces that might undo it. Water, weight, and time. Rain ran off its sloped edges into ditches. Heavy carts passed over it, their wheels striking sparks against stone. Soldiers marched by the thousands, their sandals striking rhythmically, the sound echoing for miles. And yet the road held. Decade after decade, century after century, it endured, its layers working silently together to resist decay. The genius of these layers was not only their strength, but their simplicity. Each had its role, the statumen anchoring, the rootus binding, the nucleus smoothing, the summa crusta protecting. Alone, none could last. Together, they created a surface that carried the empire itself. The Romans knew this, and they planned for it. To build a road was to invest labor and time, but also to trust that the work would outlast generations. A man who carried gravel to a site might never see the full road completed, yet his effort would serve travelers long after he was gone. Picture the scene as the road neared completion. The sun is setting, long shadows stretching across the land. Workers wipe sweat from their brows, their clothes streaked with dust. The final stones are lowered into place, the gaps filled, the edges sloped neatly to the ditches. A cart is driven across, its wheels clattering against the new surface, its load steady as it rolls. Children run behind, laughing, their bare feet feeling the firmness of stone where once there was only earth. An officer nods in approval, satisfied that the road will bear the march of soldiers, the weight of supplies, the burden of empire. The line stretches out into the distance, straight and sure, a scar across the land that will heal into permanence. What is remarkable is that many of these roads remain even now. Centuries have passed, empires have fallen, kingdoms have risen, yet the stones of the Roman roads still lie firm in many places. Grass grows along their edges, weeds sprout in the cracks, but the structure beneath remains, the hidden layers holding strong. Travelers today can walk upon them, can place their feet where legionaries once marched, can feel beneath their soles the same solidity that carried carts and horses 2,000 years ago. The endurance of these roads is not magic, but careful design, patient labor, and the strength of layers built with purpose. The Romans knew that empires might rise and fall, but stone, if laid with care, could outlast kings and centuries. The layers they built were more than engineering. They were faith in permanence, in the belief that order imposed upon nature could endure. Each layer spoke silently of this belief, the heavy stones below whispering of strength, the gravel above whispering of unity, the flat paving stones whispering of continuity. Together, they created not just a road but a path through time, a connection that stretched beyond the present into the future. When we think of Roman roads, we should not picture only the smooth paving stones beneath the sun. We should picture the unseen layers, the hidden strength, the careful design beneath the surface. For that is where their genius lies, not in what was visible, but in what was buried, enduring silently beneath every step. The Roman road was never content to end where the land grew difficult. Rivers, marshes, and valleys were not obstacles, but challenges, and challenges were to be mastered. For the vision of the road was not only to carry men and goods across easy plains, but to stretch without hesitation across landscapes that seemed impassable. To achieve this, the Romans built bridges, raised causeways, and shaped crossings that carried the strength of their engineering into the very heart of nature's resistance. These works were not merely practical solutions. They were monuments of quiet endurance, designed to last as long as the empire itself. When the surveyors first laid out a line of road, rivers appeared as inevitable barriers. They could not be skirted endlessly, for the Roman principle of straightness demanded efficiency. A river might curve and twist, but the road cut directly across. The solution was the bridge. Roman bridges were marvels of stone and arch, built with such precision that many still stand today. The process began with foundations sunk deep into the riverbed, massive stones lowered into the water, their weight anchoring them against the current. Piers rose from these foundations, their shapes often pointed at the upstream side to cut the force of the water, their surfaces smooth to reduce wear. Upon these piers rested arches, semicircular forms built stone by stone, each wedge-shaped block pressing against the next until the keystone was set. Once the keystone was placed, the arch held firm, distributing weight evenly, defying collapse through balance rather than brute strength. To walk across such a bridge was to feel the stability of centuries. Beneath the traveler, the river flowed swift and restless, its waters foaming around the piers, its surface glittering beneath the sun. But the road above was steady, its stones unmoving, its line unbroken. Soldiers marched without pause, carts rattled steadily, messengers galloped swiftly, all carried across by the enduring grace of stone and design. For the Romans, the bridge was not merely a convenience. It was proof that the empire could master even the power of rivers. Where others saw division, the Romans laid connection, their arches spanning not only water but time itself. Marshes and lowlands posed a different challenge. Their soil was soft, their waters stagnant, their surfaces treacherous. Wagons would sink, feet would falter, armies would stall. Yet even here the Roman road did not stop. The solution was the causeway, long stretches of raised ground built across wet and shifting land. Workers drove piles of wood deep into the soil, laying them close together to create stability. Over these, they poured layers of stone and earth, building a platform above the marsh. The surface was sloped to the sides, allowing water to drain away into ditches that lined the causeway. Slowly, what had been a stretch of impassable mud became a firm path, a ribbon of stone floating above the wetland, connecting one firm piece of earth to another. The labor was immense. Men hauled baskets of gravel and stone, their feet sinking into the soft earth with every step. Timber was cut and carried, driven into the marsh with pounding hammers. The air was heavy with dampness, the smell of mud and water clinging to the workers as they toiled. Yet piece by piece, load by load, the causeway rose, and with it rose the certainty that even the weakest land could be made strong. When complete, the causeway stretched across the marsh like a line of defiance, its stones firm beneath the wheels of carts, its surface dry beneath the sandals of soldiers. For those who crossed, it was a miracle of endurance, the taming of land that had once resisted every step. Valleys and gorges, too, demanded crossings. Here, the Romans built embankments, raising the ground itself until it met the level of the road. Earth was piled high, stone walls built to hold it in place, creating long artificial slopes that lifted the road above the depth of the valley. In some cases, entire hills were reshaped, their soil carved and shifted, their rocks broken and carried, until the line of the road stretched straight across what had once seemed impossible. These embankments, though less graceful than bridges, carried the same message. The road would not bend or break. It would continue as the empire willed. Imagine the sight of one of these great works in progress. At a river crossing, scaffolding rises from the water, wooden frames holding stones in place as masons shape the arch. Workers shout over the roar of the current, their tools striking, their bodies straining. The air is filled with the sound of chisels on stone, of hammers on wood, of voices carried across the water. Slowly, the arch rises, stone by stone, until the keystone locks it all into place. The scaffolding is removed, and there it stands, a bridge strong enough to carry armies, elegant enough to inspire awe. Or picture the marsh, where rows of men carry baskets of earth, their feet sinking into the mud, their shoulders bent beneath the weight. The line of the causeway lengthens, stretching further across the wetland, each step firming what was once unsteady. The road grows, the path extends, and the vision of connection becomes reality. These bridges and causeways were not temporary. They were built to last, to outlive their builders, to carry the weight of centuries. The Romans believed that no investment of labor was wasted if it brought permanence. A bridge might take years to complete, its stones cut and fitted with care, its arches rising slowly from the river. But once built, it stood for centuries, carrying not only soldiers and merchants, but the memory of those who had shaped it. A causeway might require endless loads of gravel and stone, endless hours of pounding and leveling. But once finished, it carried the weight of empire across land that would otherwise swallow men whole. Travelers who crossed these works felt their power. A merchant guiding his cart across a bridge knew that he was safe from the river's wrath. A soldier marching along a causeway knew that his feet would not sink into mud. A messenger galloping across an embankment knew that his speed would not falter. These crossings turned what had been obstacles into certainty, weaving the empire together more tightly than walls or laws ever could. They were the veins of Rome, carrying life into every corner of its body. Even now, many of these bridges still stand. Their stones, weathered by rain and wind, still arch gracefully across rivers. Their surfaces, worn smooth by countless feet and wheels, still bear the marks of centuries of use. Some are broken, their keystones fallen, their piers crumbled, yet even in ruin they speak of endurance. They remind us that the Romans built not for a season, but for eternity. Their vision stretching far beyond their own lifetimes. To build a bridge, to raise a causeway, to carve a crossing was not only to serve the present. It was to lay a path for the future, to create a connection that would outlast kings, wars, and empires. Each arch, each pile driven into mud, each embankment raised was a testament to the belief that obstacles were not barriers, but opportunities for endurance. The Roman road did not stop where the land grew difficult. It pressed forward, steady and unbroken, carrying with it the strength of stone, the patience of labor, and the vision of permanence. The Roman road was a marvel of engineering, but behind its strength lay the strength of men, the countless hands, backs, and shoulders that shaped earth, moved stone, and pressed each layer into place. To speak of Roman roads without speaking of the people who built them is to miss the living heart of their endurance. The vision of the surveyors, the plans of the engineers, the authority of the Senate. All these meant nothing until they were turned into reality by the sweat of soldiers and laborers. Without them, the line of the road would have remained only a line drawn on maps. With them, it became a living artery of empire, stretching across landscapes and through centuries. Soldiers were often the first workforce to arrive when a road was ordered. The Roman legions were not only warriors but builders, trained not only in combat, but in the discipline of construction. To the Roman mind, an army that could build was as powerful as an army that could fight, for a road meant faster marches, steadier supply lines, and surer communication. A legion might arrive at a frontier not only to defend it, but to cut a road through its forests, to raise a bridge across its rivers, to carve paths into its mountains. Their picks and shovels became weapons of endurance, conquering the land as effectively as their swords conquered enemies. The daily labor of soldiers was relentless. Imagine a line of men under the hot sun, each carrying tools as heavy as weapons, their sandals coated with dust, their tunics soaked with sweat. They marched not into battle, but into work, setting down their shields to lift stones, laying aside their spears to cut trenches. Orders rang out from centurions, voices sharp and commanding, driving the rhythm of the labor. Soldiers dug deep into the soil, their spades striking in unison, their bodies bending and lifting in endless repetition. They carried baskets of gravel, hoisted stones onto carts, cleared forests with axes that rang loudly in the morning air. And when the day was done, they slept in camps built alongside the line of the road, their tents arranged with the same discipline that shaped their work. Yet soldiers were not the only hands at labor. Civilians too were drawn into the great task. Local laborers, often pressed into service or hired under contract, carried stones, mixed mortar, and spread gravel. Freedmen seeking wages, peasants seeking survival, artisans lending skill, all added their strength to the road. To them, the work was backbreaking, but it also carried meaning. A road that cut across their fields or valleys brought disruption, but it also brought connection. In time, they too would walk upon it, bringing their goods to markets, traveling to towns, living in villages that grew alongside its path. Their sweat was not only for Rome, but for themselves, though they may not have seen it that way in the moment. The cooperation of soldiers and laborers gave Roman roads their unique endurance. Soldiers brought discipline, order, and speed. They worked in formation, their movements drilled and organized, their bodies hardened by training. Laborers brought numbers, experience, and familiarity with the land. They knew how to cut stone from local quarries, how to use timber from local forests, how to handle the soil of their valleys and hills. Together, they created a workforce that was as relentless as it was efficient, each group carrying the task forward until the line of the road stretched further each day. The conditions of the work were harsh. The sun beat down on bare shoulders. The rain soaked through woolen cloaks. The wind carried dust into eyes and mouths. Tools blistered hands. Stones strained muscles. Hours stretched long into exhaustion. There were no easy days. A soldier who had marched for miles might then be set to dig trenches until his arms shook. A laborer who had cut wood all morning might spend the afternoon carrying gravel until his back ached. Yet still the work continued, for Rome demanded it, and Rome's demands were met with endurance. Despite the hardship, there was a strange pride in the labor. Soldiers who built roads knew that their work carried meaning beyond the battlefield. A road built today meant that tomorrow their comrades could march more swiftly, their supplies could arrive more surely, their empire could stand more firmly. Laborers, too, sometimes felt this pride, though mixed with the bitterness of toil. The sight of a finished road, straight, strong, unbroken, was proof that their hands had shaped something that would last. Many of them would never see the distant ends of the road they built, never travel further than their own towns, but their labor connected them silently to lands they could only imagine. Picture the scene of such construction. A valley stretches wide, filled with the sound of men at work. The rhythm of picks striking earth echoes across the hills. The creak of carts laden with stone mixes with the crack of whips urging oxen forward. Smoke rises from fires where laborers cooked simple meals. Children of local workers watch from the edges, their eyes wide as they see forests fall and ground leveled. Centurions walk among the soldiers, their staffs in hand, urging the work to continue. Engineers stand by, measuring, marking, adjusting lines. And through it all, the road slowly takes shape, a scar of order growing longer each day. The role of soldiers and laborers was not only physical but symbolic. Their work embodied the Roman idea that empire was built not only by conquest but by endurance, not only by victory but by construction. A road carried no weapons, yet it was as powerful as any legion, for it allowed legions to move swiftly, to strike suddenly, to hold firmly. A road carried no crown, yet it was as mighty as any decree, for it allowed governors to rule, traders to sell, messengers to carry words across provinces. The sweat of ordinary men became the silent strength of Rome itself. Even when the road was complete, the memory of the labor remained. Travelers who walked its smooth stones rarely thought of the countless hands that had placed them, of the soldiers who had bent their backs, of the laborers who had carried gravel until their muscles failed. Yet the endurance of the road was their legacy, written not in names carved on monuments, but in the weight of stone pressed into earth. Every cart that rolled, every soldier that marched, every traveler that walked carried with them the unseen presence of those who had built the way. The Roman road endures not because of vision alone, not because of design alone, but because of labor. It endures because men endured, men who lifted and carried, who cut and shaped, who sweated and bled. Their role was quiet, uncelebrated, often forgotten, but without it the empire would have crumbled. The roads of Rome were the roads of soldiers and laborers, built not by marble and speeches, but by hands that worked until the line was made firm. And so, when we walk today upon the remnants of those ancient stones, we walk also upon the memory of the men who laid them. Their work, though nameless, is still beneath our feet, carrying us as surely now as it carried Rome then. The empire may have fallen, but the labor endures, written in stone across the landscapes of time. When the Romans first began laying stones across valleys and forests, they did not only imagine armies marching or merchants driving carts. They may not have fully foreseen it, but every mile of road would soon draw life to its edges. Where once there had been silence, now voices rose. Where once there had been emptiness, now footsteps echoed. The road was not only a path across the empire, it became a line around which life gathered, shaped, and endured. To walk along a Roman road was to see not only stone beneath your feet, but the living rhythm of an empire unfolding on both sides. The first to appear along these roads were often soldiers. Garrisons were established at intervals, small forts built to guard the line, to watch for danger, to offer safety to travelers. Their camps brought with them blacksmiths, cooks, servants, and traders who supplied what soldiers could not make themselves. Soon enough, little markets formed just outside the walls, where locals sold food, cloth, and tools. The steady presence of soldiers gave confidence to others. Merchants knew their wagons would be safer. Families knew they could travel without as much fear. The road, guarded and watched, became a living artery of order. Merchants followed quickly. Carts rolled steadily, laden with grain from fields, with oil from presses, with wine from vineyards, with cloth from looms. Their wheels left grooves in the paving stones. Their animals drank from troughs set beside the road. Their drivers called out greetings as they passed one another. Inns sprang up to house them, simple at first, a wooden structure, a hearth fire, a place to rest animals, but growing in time into more permanent lodgings. These inns, known as mansions, became familiar to travelers, markers of distance, small islands of comfort in long journeys. Smoke rose from their chimneys, the smell of food carried on the wind, the murmur of voices filling their courtyards as weary travelers gathered to eat and rest. Villages soon grew beside the roads. A farmer whose field lay near the line might build a stall to sell fresh produce to those passing by. A potter might carry his wares to the edge, displaying them for soldiers or merchants who needed bowls or jars. Children played where carts rolled, their laughter mixing with the creak of wheels and the steps of animals. Houses clustered together, first a few, then more, until a settlement was born. The road became not only a path of passage but a spine around which entire communities formed. Imagine walking such a road at the height of its use. The sun is low, casting long shadows across the paving stones. Ahead, a line of soldiers marches steadily, their armor glinting, their sandals striking in rhythm. Behind them comes a cart, its driver urging oxen forward, the wheels rattling loudly. On the side of the road, a family sits beneath a tree, resting from their journey, a child nibbling on bread while a mother soothes an infant. Not far away, and in bustles with noise, men unloading sacks of grain, women stirring pots over fires, animals stamping their hooves in the yard. The air is filled with scents of food, smoke, and the faint sweetness of crushed herbs from fields nearby. All around, life hums quietly, carried along by the road itself. The roads also carried news. Messengers rode swiftly, their horses foaming, their cloaks snapping in the wind. They brought letters sealed with wax, orders from generals, decrees from emperors, accounts from governors. Villagers watched them pass, knowing that within those letters lay decisions that might shape their lives. News traveled faster along Roman roads than anywhere else, connecting distant provinces to the heart of Rome in days instead of weeks. Information became another form of life carried along the stones, unseen but powerful, shaping the empire as surely as armies and trade. Markets often formed at road junctions, where two great lines met. These places became alive with noise and color. Farmers laid out baskets of fruit, fishermen displayed their catch, weavers showed bolts of cloth, smiths hammered tools into shape. Voices rose in many languages, for the empire was vast, and its roads connected people from every corner. Coins changed hands, goods exchanged, stories shared. A traveler stopping for water might hear tales from far provinces, of storms in the sea, of battles in the mountains, of harvests in distant valleys. The road did not only carry goods, it carried culture, weaving together people who might otherwise never meet. Even the quiet stretches of road bore signs of life. Wayfarers walked steadily, carrying bundles upon their shoulders. Pilgrims traveled with staffs, their eyes fixed on distant shrines. Families moved with carts piled high, children perched on top, their laughter carrying on the wind. Shepherds guided flocks alongside the road, the bells of sheep tinkling softly. Farmers carried tools to distant fields, their sandals worn smooth by the stones. Life pressed against the road like water against a riverbank, flowing with it, shaped by it, never far from its line. But the road also demanded care. Workers were assigned to maintain it, to clear debris, to fill ruts, to reset stones loosened by weather. Their presence, though humble, was vital, for without them the road would crumble. They walked its length, carrying tools, watching for signs of wear, repairing what time had undone. Their quiet labor was another form of life along the road, uncelebrated, unnoticed, but as essential as the merchants and soldiers who passed. Night brought another rhythm. The road that bustled with carts and soldiers in daylight grew quiet beneath the stars. Inns glowed faintly with lantern light, their fires burning low. Travelers rested, their animals tied, their voices hushed. The stones of the road, still warm from the day's sun, gleamed faintly in the moonlight. Owls called from nearby trees, and the distant bark of dogs carried on the air. The road did not sleep, for even at night some travelers pressed onward, but its pace slowed, its hum softened. Life along the road was never fully still, but it shifted with the hours, flowing like the tide. Over time, entire towns grew where the roads passed. Some became bustling centers of trade, their markets filled, their streets alive. Others remained small, little more than clusters of homes and shops. Yet all shared the same truth. The road gave them life. Without it, they would have been isolated, their goods confined to local markets, their news delayed, their growth stunted. With it, they became part of something larger, connected to the pulse of the empire. The life along Roman roads was not only economic or practical, it was cultural. Ideas traveled as surely as carts and soldiers. A song sung in one province might be heard in another. A style of pottery, a pattern of cloth, a way of cooking, all spread along the lines of stone. People carried not only goods but customs, stories, and ways of life. In this way, the road became not only a physical connection but a thread weaving together the fabric of the empire. And so, the Roman road was never empty. Even when the land around it seemed quiet, even when no carts rolled or soldiers marched, it carried the memory of life. Its stones bore the wear of sandals and wheels, its edges the marks of markets and homes, its length the echo of voices long faded. To walk it was to walk through the living history of an empire. To feel beneath one's feet not only stone but the pulse of countless lives that had passed before. The Roman road endures today. But what endures most strongly is not only its stones. It is the life it carried. The merchants, the soldiers, the families, the workers, the messengers, the children. Their footsteps are gone. Their voice is silent, yet their presence lingers, woven into the road itself. Every stone is a memory, every mile a story. Life along the roads was the true legacy of Rome, more enduring than battles, more lasting than monuments. For as long as the roads carried life, the empire lived. And even now, long after the empire has fallen, the roads still whisper of that life, steady and unbroken, beneath the passage of time. The Roman road was more than stone pressed into earth, more than gravel and paving, more than a path for carts and marching feet. It was also a message, a silent declaration etched into the landscape, carrying the weight of Rome's authority. For the empire, the road was as much a symbol as it was a tool, a line of power that stretched across mountains and valleys, reminding all who walked upon it that they were bound to something greater. To travel along a Roman road was not simply to move from one town to another, but to step into the embrace of empire itself. Every straight mile of stone told a story of control. The decision to cut through hills, to bridge rivers, to carve paths into forests was not only an act of engineering, but of authority. The land bent where Rome willed it to bend. Nature itself was reshaped into order, its wildness disciplined by ditches, embankments, and paving stones. For villagers who had once followed winding trails and muddy paths, the appearance of a Roman road was a revelation. Here was a surface that did not yield, a line that did not wander, a structure that ignored obstacles. It said, without words, that Rome had come, and that Rome intended to stay. The roads became symbols of unity. The empire was vast, stretching across seas and deserts, encompassing people of many languages, customs, and beliefs. Yet the roads tied them together, turning distance into closeness, isolation into connection. A farmer in Gaul could send his grain along the same line that carried letters from governors in Hispania, the same line that bore soldiers from Italy, the same line that merchants in Africa used to bring oil to distant markets. The road was not the possession of one people, but of all, a shared surface that made the empire feel like a single body. To walk its length was to walk across provinces, to move from one culture to another, carried by the same unbroken stone. The symbolism of the road also carried weight in war. When legions marched swiftly along their smooth surfaces, enemies saw not only soldiers, but the might of an empire that could project power across great distances. No mountain was too steep, no river too wide, no valley too deep. The road carried armies wherever Rome desired. It was as if the stones themselves declared Rome's reach, whispering to those who resisted that there was no escape, no corner too remote. The roads became as fearsome as weapons, for they gave Rome speed, and speed gave Rome victory for the people who lived along them. The roads brought both comfort and awe. They provided safety, markets, and communication, but they also reminded villagers and townsfolk of the empire's presence. Each milestone set along the road bore the name of the emperor, a marker of power as much as of distance. To pass one was to be reminded that every step lay under Rome's gaze, that every journey was measured not only in miles, but in loyalty. The stone markers, simple and unadorned, were monuments of authority scattered across the landscape, silent witnesses of empire. Even their straightness carried meaning. Other paths wandered with the land, curving around hills, following the easiest course. Roman roads cut straight, their lines stretching into the horizon, unbroken, unwavering. That straightness was more than efficiency. It was a statement of Rome's determination. Where nature curved, Rome cut. Where obstacles rose, Rome pierced. The road was a line of willpower, a symbol of discipline, of order imposed upon chaos. It reflected the Roman ideal that strength came not from bending, but from enduring. The roads also symbolized continuity. Empires before Rome had risen and fallen. Their cities crumbled, their monuments abandoned. But the Romans built with the belief that their works would endure. Each road was a promise to the future, an investment not only for today's soldiers and merchants, but for generations yet unborn. And so the roads became symbols of permanence. Villagers who walked them might not think in centuries, but the stones beneath their feet carried that weight. They whispered of a time when the empire would still endure, when their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would travel the same line. In this way, the road was not only a present reality, but a vision of the future. The symbolism of the road extended even into memory. To those who later looked back on the empire, the roads became one of its most enduring images. Temples crumbled, statues fell, palaces decayed, but the roads remained. Grass grew between their stones, villages vanished from their sides, but the line of the road endured, steady and unbroken. For centuries after Rome's fall, travelers still walked the roads, pilgrims still followed their course, merchants still drove their carts along their worn stones. They became symbols of resilience, proof that the empire, though gone, had left something that could not easily be undone. Picture the scene of a traveler centuries after the empire's height, walking along a worn Roman road. The stones are uneven. Now, their edges chipped, their surfaces smooth with age. Weeds grow between them, their roots pressing upward. Yet the line of the road is still there, stretching ahead, leading onward. The traveler may not think of the soldiers who built it, the laborers who carried gravel, the engineers who measured angles, but the traveler walks upon their memory all the same. Each step is a reminder of the power that once ordered the world, of the empire that once spanned seas, of the vision that believed in permanence. The power of the roads also lay in silence. Unlike temples or triumphal arches, they did not boast loudly. They did not demand admiration. They lay beneath feet, humble and steady, carrying life without ceremony. Yet in their silence lay their strength. They were everywhere, reaching into the remotest corners of the empire, touching the daily lives of ordinary people. A farmer leading a donkey, a child walking to a village, a merchant guiding his cart, all felt the road's presence, though few spoke of it. In this quiet, the road carried a different kind of power, the power of constancy, of being always there, of shaping lives without needing to announce itself. And so the Roman road was never just a road. It was a symbol of empire, of unity, of permanence, of will. It told those who walked upon it that they were part of something larger, that their steps joined countless others, that their lives, though small, were connected to the vast body of Rome. Its stones spoke without words, declaring Rome's strength, Rome's order, Rome's endurance. And though the empire has long since faded, the symbolism of the road endures, steady as the stone beneath the earth, whispering still of power, of connection, of the human will to build something that lasts beyond the span of life. For centuries, the Roman roads had carried life, armies marching in unbroken lines, merchants guiding heavy carts, messengers galloping with words of command, families traveling from one town to another. They were arteries of empire, steady and enduring, binding provinces together like veins through the body. Yet when the empire itself began to falter, the roads remained. They did not crumble when the Senate grew weak. They did not shift when emperors fell. They did not vanish when enemies broke across the frontiers. Instead, they carried the story of decline as surely as they had once carried the story of strength. To understand the fall of Rome is to understand how even its roads, those steady lines of stone, could not prevent the unraveling. Though they bore witness to it with silent endurance, in the early centuries of the empire, the roads had been lifelines of control. Legions could march swiftly to suppress rebellion, to guard borders, to carry Rome's authority into distant lands. But as time passed, the very roads that had once carried Roman strength also carried its weakness. Invading forces learned to use them, following the straight lines that led directly into the heart of provinces. The roads that had once given Rome speed now gave its enemies the same gift. Goths, Vandals, Huns, all found their way along the lines that Rome had laid. What had been an advantage became a path of vulnerability, turning the empire's greatest tool into a channel of invasion. Trade, too, suffered in the decline. Where once merchants had rolled their carts in steady streams, the roads grew emptier. Provinces that had once been tied tightly to Rome began to turn inward, their connections weakening as stability faded. Bandits appeared along the roads, preying on travelers, making long journeys dangerous. Inns that had once bustled with life grew silent or fell into disrepair. The milestones, once proudly bearing the names of emperors, stood weathered and forgotten, their inscriptions fading as authority itself faded. The roads remained solid, but the life upon them thinned, like veins carrying less blood as the body weakened. And yet, they did not vanish. Even as the empire fractured, the roads carried movement. Soldiers still marched, though fewer and less disciplined. Traders still traveled, though cautiously and in smaller numbers. Families still walked, carrying bundles on their backs, seeking safer towns or more fertile land. Refugees fled along the roads when cities were sacked. Their footsteps hurried, their eyes filled with fear. The roads bore all of it, silent witnesses to the transformation of empire into chaos. Each stone that had once echoed with the rhythm of disciplined sandals now carried the uneven footsteps of those escaping decline. Imagine the sight of a Roman road in those final centuries. The paving stones are still firm, though worn smooth by centuries of use. Grass grows at the edges, ditches fill with leaves, milestones lean at odd angles. A caravan moves slowly, its drivers glancing nervously at the tree line, fearful of raiders. A group of refugees trudges behind, children stumbling, mothers carrying infants, fathers guiding carts filled with what little they have saved. In the distance, the sound of hooves approaches, not the steady beat of Roman cavalry, but the scattered gallop of tribes pushing deeper into Roman lands. The road, once a symbol of order, now bears the signs of disorder, carrying not power but survival. As central authority weakened, local communities began to claim the roads for themselves. Towns used them to connect with nearby villages. Farmers used them to reach markets. Small rulers used them to gather tribute. The empire no longer commanded their maintenance, and yet the roads still endured, their strength built to outlast neglect. Weeds pushed up between stones, drainage ditches clogged, surfaces cracked, but the underlying layers remained. Where the empire had fallen, the roads continued to serve, now not for Rome, but for whoever walked upon them. The symbolism of the roads shifted in these times. They no longer declared the strength of an unbroken empire. Instead, they stood as reminders of what had been. To walk upon them was to walk in the shadow of a world that was fading. A soldier marching in the service of a failing general still marched on stones laid by ancestors in the age of triumph. A merchant carrying a basket of goods still walked on paths that once bore caravans from every corner of the empire. The stones whispered of permanence, but the life upon them spoke of decline. Even in the fall, the roads shaped the course of history. Invaders did not wander blindly. They followed the lines that Rome had carved. Settlers who came after Rome's collapse built their villages and towns along the old routes. Medieval kingdoms rose upon the skeleton of Roman roads, their markets, castles, and churches standing where milestones once marked imperial miles. Though the empire had ended, its roads continued to shape the land, carrying forward a legacy that outlived its makers. The fall of Rome was not a sudden collapse, but a slow fading, a long unraveling of strength. And through it all, the roads bore witness. They carried armies that no longer held discipline, traders who no longer found safety, refugees who no longer found peace. They stood as symbols of endurance amid decay, steady lines across a world growing uncertain. Their stones held firm even as the empire they served slipped away. Picture the roads centuries later, long after Rome's banners had fallen. Farmers lead their oxen across them, guiding wagons of hay. Pilgrims walk steadily, staffs in hand, their eyes fixed on distant shrines. Knights of medieval kingdoms ride along them, their horses' hooves striking sparks from stones laid 1,000 years before. The empire is gone, but the roads endure, carrying new lives, new empires, new histories. They remind us that even in fall, something remains. The Roman roads and the fall of Rome are bound together. The roads carried the empire's rise, its glory, its reach. They also carried its decline, its weakness, its collapse. They outlasted the empire, yet they carry its memory, silent and steady beneath centuries of footsteps. In their endurance lies the paradox of Rome, an empire that could not last forever, but that built something which still endures. And so, when we speak of the fall of Rome, we must also remember the roads. For they are not only relics of engineering, they are witnesses of history, bearing the story of triumph and decline alike. Their stones whisper of power, of endurance, of change. The empire is gone, but the roads remain, steady lines through time, carrying with them the echo of a world that once believed it could last forever. Long after the emperors had fallen silent, long after the legions had laid down their shields, long after the Senate had ceased to speak with power, the Roman roads endured. Their stones, pressed firmly into the earth, did not vanish with the empire that had created them. Instead, they continued to stretch across valleys and plains, across mountains and rivers, silent but steady, carrying lives that had never known the names of Caesar or Augustus. The roads were Rome's quiet legacy, surviving not in speeches or monuments, but in the simple act of connection. The unbroken line of stone that outlasted kingdoms, dynasties, and centuries that end the centuries after Rome's fall. The roads became lifelines once more, though not for emperors. They carried farmers bringing grain to markets, shepherds guiding their flocks to pasture, pilgrims walking to distant shrines. They carried merchants of new kingdoms, their carts filled with goods, their wheels rattling against stones laid 1,000 years before. They carried knights and nobles, peasants and travelers, each of them placing their footsteps into the grooves carved long ago by legionaries. Though the empire was gone, its presence lingered beneath their feet, a memory pressed into the earth, guiding them onward. The roads shaped the growth of medieval Europe. Towns rose where roads crossed. Markets thrived where milestones once stood. Castles were built near junctions to guard and tax the flow of goods. Villages that might have remained isolated became connected, their lives woven together by the enduring paths. Trade flowed along them. Culture spread, ideas traveled. Monks carried manuscripts along the same lines where soldiers once carried swords. Pilgrims walked steadily toward holy places, their staffs striking stones cut in an age they could scarcely imagine. In this way, the Roman roads became more than relics. They became foundations for the world that followed. Their endurance astonished all who used them. In an age when many roads were muddy tracks, sinking under rain and season, the old Roman roads still lay firm. Weeds might grow along their edges, stones might shift, but the structure beneath remained. Travelers marveled at their straightness, their firmness, their refusal to vanish. For those who knew little of Rome, the roads seemed almost unnatural, as if they had been built not by men, but by something greater. They whispered of a past too vast to forget, a presence that lingered even in absence. The symbolism of the roads deepened in these later centuries. They no longer spoke of an empire at its height, but of memory itself. They reminded travelers that human works could endure, that even when kingdoms fell, something remained. Each step upon them was a step into history, a reminder that the world they knew had been shaped by those who came before. The roads carried not only people but also memory, binding the present to the past in silence. Imagine a medieval traveler walking along a Roman road. The sun is low, the air cool. The stones beneath his sandals are uneven but firm, their surfaces worn smooth. Around him stretches forest, quiet and deep, yet the road cuts straight, guiding him onward. He does not know the names of the men who laid these stones, nor the exact year when they were placed, but he feels their presence. He walks upon the work of hands long gone, upon the will of a people who believed in endurance. In his silence, he senses connection, as if he too is part of the same long story, his footsteps joining millions before him. The legacy of the Roman roads reached even further. They influenced how later generations thought about building, about permanence, about order. Engineers studied them, copying their methods, marveling at their layers. Rulers sought to imitate them, though few could match their endurance. Even in modern times, many roads still follow the old Roman lines, their paths too efficient, too enduring to abandon. Cars now travel where once carts rolled, buses and trucks where once soldiers marched. Yet beneath the modern surface lies the same ancient course, the same line first traced by Roman surveyors with cords and poles. The roads did not end with Rome. They live still in the maps we use today. Their greatest legacy, perhaps, is not material but symbolic. They remind us of the human desire to connect, to endure, to build something that outlasts us. The Romans built their roads not for a season, but for centuries, and in doing so they gave the world a lesson in permanence. Each layer, the statumen, the rudis, the nucleus, the summa crusta, spoke of patience, of planning, of the belief that time itself could be mastered. And in many ways, they were right. Time has worn away empires, but it has not erased their roads. The roads also remind us that history is not only in monuments or palaces, but in the ordinary. A road is humble, lying beneath feet, carrying carts, bearing the weight of daily life. Yet it was this very humility that gave the Roman roads their power. They touched every life, from emperor to peasant, from soldier to child. They carried battles and markets, news and silence, hope and sorrow. They were not built for glory but for use, and in that use they became eternal. Even now, to walk upon a Roman road is to feel history beneath your feet. Each stone, though weathered and worn, carries the memory of hands that placed it, of feet that pressed it, of wheels that rattled across it. Each mile carries the whisper of empire, of connection, of endurance. The empire itself has long since passed into memory, but the roads remain, steady and unbroken, a living link between past and present. And so, the Roman roads are Rome's true legacy. Not the marble temples, which have crumbled, not the statues, which have fallen, not the palaces, which have decayed, but the roads, humble, steady, enduring. They remind us that strength lies not only in conquest, but in construction, not only in power, but in patience. They are the quiet echo of an empire that once believed it could last forever. And though the empire fell, its roads proved that some dreams can. The story of the Roman roads is not only the story of stone and engineering, nor only the story of an empire's ambition. It is the story of endurance, of lines carved across the earth that still remain long after the voices that commanded them have gone silent. They were once filled with the sound of marching feet, of wheels clattering, of voices calling out in many languages. Now, in many places, they lie quiet, grass pressing at their edges, birds calling softly from nearby trees. And yet, if you stand upon them, you can still feel their presence, the weight of history beneath your feet. These roads remind us that what we build outlasts us, that strength does not only lie in conquest, but in connection. That patience, layer upon layer, can shape something that endures through storms, through centuries, through the fall of kingdoms. The empire itself has faded into memory, but the roads remain, steady lines through time, carrying the echo of every life that once moved upon them. As you let these images settle in your mind, picture a Roman road at twilight. The sun has set, the horizon glows faintly, and the stones beneath your feet are still warm from the day. The air is calm, the world quiet. You stand where countless others once stood, their footsteps long vanished, yet their memory lingers in the stones. Ahead, the road stretches onward, straight and sure, disappearing into the distance. It asks nothing of you but to walk, to follow, to trust that it will carry you forward as it carried so many before. Now let that road fade gently into silence. The voices of soldiers, merchants, travelers, and children drift away. The clatter of wheels and the rhythm of sandals grow still. All that remains is calm, the steady presence of stone beneath, the endless sky above, the quiet of history settling into peace. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the long Roman road carry you not into noise, but into rest. The journey is complete. The empire has fallen silent. The road endures, but for you, now, it leads only into stillness. You are safe. You are home.